the best place to start maybe is just the origin of Rampage. Can you just run me down how this whole thing kicked off a few decades ago, just like from the beginning? How did this happen?
Yeah, it's a long, sordid story. I mean, we're 23 years into this event right now, and it sometimes I'm amazed that we're still doing it. But when it started, I grew up, living in Tahoe, skiing, snowboarding. That was really kind of my life growing up. And then just found a real love for putting on events. I actually worked for a nonprofit for a while and just kind of got the bug for putting on events. Ski, snowboarding, mountain biking is all part of the Tahoe culture. And, we started the event really humbly in 2001. We were actually at a ski event at Squaw Valley, Palisades, now. And we were just talking about big mountain skiing and snowboarding. And, we're all mountain bikers, and like, there's nothing going on in the mountain bike scene. And these guys are out there. There was the Fro Riders at the time with Tippy and Wade Simmons and Schley, and all those guys were out making films with New World Disorder at the time. Yet there was really no competition or way for these people to come out and kind of ride together and do a competition type of format. So we actually were just like, how do we get there? And we're like, let's try and figure out how to do an event. And at the time, Josh Bender was on the front cover of Bike Magazine for doing that Park City drop that ended not so great for him. Ended up in the hospital, but we're like, that guy's got to know a little something about free ride, and he seems to be one of the main guys out there pushing it. So got a hold of him, called him, and then flew out to Virgin, Utah, and met him. Him and his girlfriend were living in Laverkin at the time, and they made me dinner. We sat down and started talking about different locations from all over the area, and we actually went down to like southern Utah, down to like Hanksville, Caneville, and it looked all good, but it was what I kind of call mini golf. It was like there was a hit here, a hit there, but it was like, this is really gonna look for what we're trying to do. And he's like, well, I've got some stuff in my backyard. And so a couple of days later, we drove back up, the Kolob Canyon area, and we saw it, and it was like, that's it. That's Alaska made out of dirt. And so from that second, we were kind of like, that's the location. And then we worked with the land managers at the time, and they were really helpful and actually helped us get that first one done, which was pretty amazing. Um, and yeah, I mean, it started so humbly. It was like I was up cold calling anybody I could find who was a free rider at the time and said, hey, do you want to come compete in this thing? It's called the Red Bull Rampage. And so we pulled together a pretty motley crew that first year. I think we had 17 riders, including Kyle Strait, who was 14 at the time, Wade Simmons. It was kind of the who's who of riding back then. And we pulled them all together and put on that competition. But I mean, I think there was maybe 150 people there. It was free to attend. We had maybe a 20 by 20 tent and an RV and a speaker stack, and lined them up and put an arch at the top and sent them. And I mean, we knew once it was over and kind of like the dust settled in the afternoon, it was like, wow, that was truly something. I mean, athletes were stoked, and there was just high fives everywhere. So it was, we knew at that point we kind of had something that was cool and unique, and it went really well. So, and then we just kept on putting it on.
Wild to think, I mean, from that first day that it could get to where it is today, where, it's on ESPN and there's, people lining up and tickets selling out and all kinds of stuff for it now. I don't think anything in the mountain bike world has ever had that kind of rise. But how did it work out with Red Bull in the beginning? Did you go to them and just say, like, we've got this crazy idea and we want you guys to be a part of it? Like, how did Red Bull get involved with this like wild idea that you and Bender were kind of working towards?
Yeah, we both. I mean, it was we, as we say, co-founded it together. So there was a good friend of mine, Paul Crandall, LP, was working for Rebel. I think he was a VP of marketing at the time, and he was at these ski races, and he was, just a good friend, ally at that time. Rebel was already a partner of ours. And so him and I from the get-go were out here looking. He went and looked with Bender for a little while. I looked for it with Bender for a while, and then we found it. So it really was it's a collaboration from the get go that Red Bull and myself and H5 Events put this together, and just and I call myself, I'm the shepherd now, so I keep it moving, keep people updated, keep budgets, figuring them out, locations, keep the pulse of the athletes and making sure they're always involved in what we're doing, and so yeah, it's a very unique event. It's because it really is all about the athletes and what they do. And I think a lot of people watch Rampage and they go, wow, the organizers must build all these crazy tracks and everything they're doing. But not a lot of people know that it's actually built by the athletes and their dig teams, which has become quite complex today. Back in the day, it was just a shovel in the ground and kick a rock out of your line and send it. So it's progressed a lot, but the athletes are in charge of building their own lines and choosing it. And I think that's really the special sauce of this whole event and the reason it just continues to blow minds every year and there is no ceiling to it is because it's driven by the athletes and what they envision, what their style is, what what they think the potential of the sport is recreated every year, because the top athletes that get invited that year are the ones that are pushing the sport. So that's what evolves the event. It's I certainly have a part in it, and Red Bull has a part in it, but it's really up to the athletes and how they want to interpret the landscape. And each venue is slightly different. Some are steeper, like this year's venue was super steep and a little bit taller than most. Last year's event was a little bit wider, but a little bit lower angle. So each venue kind of allows the athletes to kind of push the sport in its direction. And sometimes I think it's, people just don't understand the armchair quarterbacks talking about the judging and how it works. And it's just so near impossible to judge because it's just terrain driven, athlete driven, digger driven, technology driven by what bikes are out there, what technology is available for each athlete to ride their bikes. So it's just so unique. And that's the thing that just never makes this thing get old, because it's just constantly evolving.
I was saying something last week about judging the event, in that it's not just about judging the athlete's performance. It's like if you were to compare it to slopestyle, everybody rides the same course. So now you have, and then you can just judge on tricks. But on this one, it's like if you lined up 18 different slopestyle courses next to each other and then had to simultaneously judge the course and the athlete at the same time, doing completely different tricks on completely different gaps. It's near impossible, like you said. I want to go back to one thing that you were talking about of how the athletes create all of the lines themselves. And what really stands out to me as someone who's been to Rampage multiple times now is not just what the athletes are doing, but the infrastructure that's available for them. And I'd love to hear you talk about what it actually takes to make the environment ready for the athletes, because they obviously put in a ton of, blood, sweat, and tears to get each one of these lines running. But behind the scenes, what you don't see on camera is, the facilities that are there for the athletes, not just the water for them to help dig, but the cafeteria that's there, the satellite trucks, the production trailers, the bikes. I mean, it's insane how much it's like a city. It's like going to mountain bike Burning Man. There's so many facilities that you have to create for the athletes to come in and be successful. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into planning that out?
Yeah, I mean, it's a year-round plan for sure, and we're always working on it. And after each year, we've got after actions on how to improve it for the next year. So we're always evolving that, just like the athletes are evolving. And so this event, like I said, from the first year was a 20 by 20 in an RV. Now I think we've got close to 300 people working out there. Everything from our base operations area, we're ticketing in front of houses where we've got credentials and merch sales and parking, and then we've got a shuttle system that takes you up the mountain, close to 4 miles up there. And once you get there, we have to create areas for parking and, like you said, catering. We feed over, I think, I don't know how many meals we served, but it was close to probably 1,300 meals we served up there this year. Massive TV production crew from Red Bull Media House to Freeride Entertainment and Gear House. So there's a bunch of different organizations up there all working together My staff this year with, and also Big Mountain Events is kind of my partner on the operations side. I think we had close to 55 people working under in all sorts of different facets from.
That's just on your team.
That's just on my team. Yeah. So, and that's a lot of people doing a lot of different things from, again, from the base area up to the event area to branding on mountain to building start arches. We bring in a helicopter that ferries close to 30 different loads across the mountain and carrying, lumber to the top to build start decks and branding and you name it across there. We've got a medical team of probably close to 40 out there as well with, life flights on the call and 2 ambulances and 6 wheelers and people all over the mountain with backboards. We have a high angle team up there that have ropes set all over the mountain just in case there's something that happens. It's just a massive organization. I walk around at it and I'm just like, wow, this thing is a monster. And but it's amazing because I've been doing it for 23 years now, and a lot of my staff has been there for. Some of them been. I don't know if they've all been there for since day one, but a few of them been there for the first couple of years, all the way through. And so when we kind of show up, I've got a crew that just hits the ground running, and and it's there's direction from my end and Brian Trujillo, who's the head of my operations. But a lot of it's like just hit the ground running. People know what to do. They've been doing it for so many years, and it's pretty amazing to watch. I'm super proud of what we do and how we do it. And, I think Red Bull really appreciates it. I got a lot of kudos from them this year and on just how well run everything is. And all the people that attend, from the media to the athletes to industry to, we had bike tech companies there this year. Like everybody just is like, wow, this thing runs well. And we try and make it a good experience for everyone who attends.
It's a pretty well-oiled machine, and you've been at it for long enough that you would hope by this point you have it relatively dialed. What are some of the things that have changed the most since that first year? Obviously, it's grown in size, but have there been any major shifts along the way that have really, even altered the way that you think about putting on events? I mean, throughout this experience?
Yeah, it's funny actually. I was looking on Richie Schlay's Instagram this morning, and he had a photo from the front cover of Mountain Bike Action, and he was kind of reminiscing from 2001, and it made me think about it. I was actually going to write something there. I didn't get to do it this morning, but it's changed dramatically, but it is the same. Like what the athletes are doing is the same as it was in 2001, because they were pushing the sport at its limit at that moment. And, there were the world's best athletes that needed to be there, and they were there, and they pushed the sport every year. So that to me is stayed the same as far as the athlete side. And it really is pretty amazing how it's just continually, the sport has been the same. It just pushes itself every year. But as far as like putting on the event, yeah, it's just been so many micro changes over 23 years. It's hard to say. It's kind of like I always say, it's like the frog in the boiling water. I don't see much change. People show up and they're like, "Oh my God, this thing has gotten so huge." I'm like, well, it seems like the same event to me every year, and it's just slightly bigger and a few more people. But so I don't totally see the change every year because I'm just so in it. But it is amazing to see how big and well run it is, and just hiring the right people. I really try and lead by being just a good boss too, and helping people. And, a fed crew is a happy crew. I always say I feed people well, I pay people well. And, we did a surf day that I sponsored out at, there's a Surfway Southern Shores and Hurricane, Utah. I took everybody out there with the athletes, and I kind of sponsored that. So just like to take care of my people and have a good time with them. And, we had a chef at our house this year. We were feeding close to 40 people at my house every night in Virgin. I got a big garage and a big front yard. And so we had, a Traeger grill out there and Gosney pizzas, and just, we had 2 chefs from New Orleans serving everybody up. So it was, we just take care of people, and we have a good time when we do it. And I think that's really shines through the event too. We all walk around with smiles on our faces, and people are like, you guys are so relaxed. And it's just like, well, we like to have a good time. There's no reason to stress over it too much, which you can't control. Just do your job. So,
Yeah, I mean, if you did it right, you've done all the hard work before the event, and then all you have to worry about is execution on the day of, right?
mhm.
There was a window in time where the event didn't exist, where it was sort of on pause, and then it came back as, Red Bull Rampage, the evolution. Can you talk
Mhm.
about what that, usually I think at that time Red Bull had sort of a policy where it was like we only do events for 3 years and then we move on or update or whatever. And then they brought Rampage back because it was such a popular property and people were asking and calling for it. And I think there was a substantial need in the mountain bike industry for Rampage. But can you talk about that window in time, what it was like having Rampage on pause, and maybe what that was like, the uncertainty of the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think much like the event, it just always seems to be what it is the next year. And we just kind of, but after 4 years of doing it from '01 to '04, we had used the location for 4 years. A lot of the terrain had been, ridden and shot and filmed, and the athletes kind of had seen it, reached its pinnacle in 2004. So we just collectively said, maybe it's just time to take a break. Let's see if we can find a different location. Um, and at that time, we kind of started almost a global search for the event. It didn't really go away in my mind from '04 to '08. Those 4 years, we were continuing in touch with Red Bull and trying to figure out new locations. We went down to Baja. We did this thing called Red Bull Recon with 8 of the top athletes down there. We thought there was a location down there. Didn't really work out. Didn't really pan out as good as we thought it would. The terrain was really rocky. We went to the Gobi Desert, which is one of the original scenes in the where the trail ends. That was a Rampage Scout that didn't quite line up either. It's just so far away and remote. Went up to Alaska. I mean, and drove 3,000 miles through Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Arizona, trying to find different locations, and really didn't find much until '08. Darren Bearclaw and I went on a long road trip, drove all the way from Salt Lake City to Santa Fe, and looked at a bunch of different locations. And we found this new location. There was a bridge that actually went into a community here in Virgin that wasn't there back in '04, so that got put in, so allowed us to get across the river to this newer location. So in '08, we kind of found this zone and got it permitted and went through all that, and that's when the evolution came back. And that was also at a time too where slopestyle was kind of a big part of what the sport was at that point. And so we kind of started building features. We actually built wood features, and that's when the Oakley Icon Sender came, and we added several different ramps to it because the sport hadn't quite caught up to the digging side of it. So we felt like we had to build that to kind of bring that part of the sport into the event. So that was a bit of a different time.
Those ramps were pretty rowdy. I remember being there that year and seeing the Canyon Gap. I think that
Yeah.
was the first one back.
Yeah.
And just watching the guys hit the Canyon Gap for the first time, sort of untested, like, hope they make it across.
Oh my
Now,
God.
Canyon Gaps are kind of a part of Rampage, but at
Yeah.
the time, that seemed like just huge step forward. What was the decision to remove ramps? Because a couple years later, ramps are essentially not part of the event anymore. What was the deciding factor with that?
We did that because it just felt like, again, speaking with athletes and where the sport had gone, I think that building dicking techniques had caught up to what we were building these ramps, and they knew that they could build it out of dirt. So, the kind of, you know, the, the backbone of Rampage is big mountain kind of natural terrain. And so we wanted to make sure that that was always a part of it. And when the ramps didn't make sense anymore, and again, the kind of building techniques had caught up with that, we decided that it was time to kind of go back to allowing people just to build it.
I love the way that it just looks like it's part of the terrain. It's not, I mean, it is manufactured, but it's all by hand, right? It
Yeah.
looks like a trail that actually belongs there as opposed to, yeah, some big wooden chunk in the middle of a trail.
Yeah, we have always prided ourselves on really trying to make it authentic and feel like part of the landscape, and also that kind of Western desert feel. So it doesn't look out of place. We take the wood and we burn it and treat it and make it look like it's antiqued, to try and just kind of make it all fit in. And, we talk to the athletes every year before they start building to try and, obviously they move quite a bit of dirt, but, try and, keep your line clean and don't take out things you don't need to take out, and just make sure it looks, the landscape looks, just as untouched as possible, so that's always been a thing. And I think that kind of comes out in the event. It kind of looks like they're just almost like the trails are always there.
Are there any other guidelines for the athletes other than like don't make a mess, basically?
Yeah, they're not allowed to bring any sort of foreign materials or use any sort of mechanical tools to do it. So all they're allowed to have is sandbags, and we give them 75 sandbags that are hemped, that are organic material. So that's the basics of that. And we haven't, in the past, before there were some rules, people would bring in, they bring in wood or rebar or this or that. And so we really decided that was kind of could get out of control. So we try and keep it all natural. And they just get the 75 sandbags and then, have to use shovels and hand tools.
I want to talk about how athletes get selected to be in the event, and specifically the event that you pulled together, Proving Grounds. So that was sort of one of the maybe first and only qualifiers that I'm aware of that kind of help people fit into the event. Whereas in the past, it maybe clarify for me, but I think it was sort of like, you and your team kind of selected who was going to be in the event by, evaluating video parts, evaluating the riders themselves, and then kind of tapping them on the shoulder. Is that right? Is that how it started? And then it moved to Proving Grounds?
Yeah. Insanely, I used to choose everybody back in the day, and that was just ridiculous. It caused a lot of grief in my direction.
I can only imagine.
So I'd say maybe 10, 12 years ago, we decided to put together a selection committee. And it's, I would say back in the day, it was fairly easy to pick the people. There was 4 or 5 people that we felt like, could possibly podium at the event. And then there was a whole group of people that were kind of up and coming. Now, we choose 18 men and 8 women, all of them have a chance to podium, I think, in my mind. So, so we now have the selection committee. There's 6 individuals on the men's and then 7 on the women's selection committee. And basically we asked for 2 video segments. So, YouTube links or, whatever links they hand to their latest 2 segments, and then a paragraph just explaining why they feel they are ready to compete at Rampage and belong there. And it sounds super simple, but it seemed to works really well with that information. And, the beta we have on, athletes that are out there, it's pretty straightforward. I think we've pride ourselves on our selection, and the people that have been there are always seem to be the right people there. So, but we always try and bring in at least 2 rookies every year. It's kind of my goal. I always like to have a World Cup athlete there as well. That's another, a downhiller that just kind of brings that DH style to it. Fairclaw, and there's G. Atherton. There's been a lot over the years that really kind of bring that. I feel like that makes the big mountain athletes kind of look over their shoulder like, what's G doing over there? What's Fairclaw doing? Because it's just such a different style. You have to kind of keep in check with what they're doing. So I think it's always good to bring them into the mix.
You had the selection committee, and then you launched Proving Grounds.
Mm-hmm.
That was out at Carson Sorch's property out in Oregon, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and how did you can you give me the history of Proving Grounds?
Yeah, we I had been speaking to Red Bull for many years, saying we need to continue to develop the sport and to kind of create a pipeline to get people to Rampage. And so we came up with the idea of Proving Grounds, or actually, well, my company came up with it, and then Red Bull got involved in it. The first year it was an actual Red Bull Rampage qualifier. And we took the top 3 men from that to compete at Rampage, and it worked really well. But year 2 came around, and COVID hit for one. So that kind of took the wind out of 2020. And then 2021, it came back, and we just decided there was such a need for, um, more events in the big mountain freeride area. There really was nothing. There's nothing going on. There's Crankworks, there's other slopestyle events, but there's nothing in that. So we decided just to take Proving Grounds and separate it from being a qualifier and just make it its own series. And yeah, we hooked up with Carson Storch and Kyle Jameson, who were involved in the Oregon Dirt Park, which is out in Prineville. And yeah, just came up with this idea and this course on this really cool location that had this nice pitch to it. And but we had to create the entire event. From building the jumps to the doubles to the hips to the wood features, everything was, manufactured and brought in to kind of represent what some of the features are in the sport and at Rampage, but being able to bring them into a venue that we could build and make it unique to that. And it had 4 or 5 different lines that came down, so the athletes, the difference between this and the slopestyle, like you said, is slopestyle is one line, and they have to compete on that one line, and are judged separately, on that line. At Proving Grounds, we build 4 or 5 lines, and it's up to the athlete to choose their path down. There'll be a little side cut. You can come over here and do a step down, or, take a shark fin and do it over here. So it really allows the athletes to have that kind of creative ability, which is, the key to free rides, just having that creative freedom to ride what you think is, will highlight the best, each athlete's best skills.
And I think importantly, and hopefully I'm right on this one, but I think importantly that one of the people who qualified at Proving Grounds was Reed Boggs. Mm-hmm. And then Reed ended up on the Rampage podium a few years later. So, not only did you put on the event to find new talent, to give people kind of a funnel to get into the event, but it actually worked. Like, you found people that were podium worthy, and maybe Reed would have been able to do it through the selection committee, but it also worked that you could find people without having to basically solicit YouTube videos and stuff like that to get the job done, right?
No, I would say, all 3 of the Proving Grounds we did brought athletes, into the light from, they were all doing their own things, video segments, but they came in a competition, and it really brought us, brought them to light and as potential Rampage athletes. So it's been a great development in its own event, so it really has kind of created its own genre of competition, of free ride competition. And that's really what I'm sure we'll get to, but that's what we've now kind of mutated into natural selection bike, which is kind of the future of Proving Grounds.
I definitely want to get to that one. I think one of the things that was the most important about Proving Grounds too, and we can also talk about, the other, but really it gave people the event experience, because there's really nothing like standing on top of the mountain in Utah with a billion cameras on you and all, thousands of people watching you. There's really nothing to prepare you for that experience, as well as being in an environment that's maybe like the highest level of riding that you've done with the highest amount of pressure. And so I think, especially for people that are into big mountain riding, there's not a competition format that they can do to warm up for Red Bull or for Rampage, or to prepare for Rampage. And I think what was equally important about Proving Grounds was giving people an opportunity to do big mountain freeride things in front of a crowd when it was time for them to drop, not just whenever they felt like it in the backcountry by themselves with a cameraman.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a real difference between what you just said there, being out filming, riding with your friends, and then being at the top of a start gate when, it's go time, and it's 3, 2, 1, and it's 10 a.m. on such and such date, and it's your number's up, and it's time to drop, and the judges are ready. And so it is definitely a skill that is learned, I think, not just taken for granted that you're going to know how to do that. So it's really important. And I think that's really what we're trying to do with this sport, because there are so many athletes out there that are hitting me up just going, when is the next stop? When is the next event? Because they want to compete. They want to see where they line up with others in the sport. And they want to have opportunity. If there's not a competition, it's hard for them to go to their partners and go to their sponsors and say, hey, I'm such and such guy or female, and, sponsor me. Well, what results do you have? Why should I? And so it kind of gives them an opportunity to become a professional, and to compete just like any other sport. So you kind of need that competitive aspect of the sport to really kind of gauge where you are.
I hosted the original meeting around well, the beginning of Red Bull formation. That was a conversation that we kind of took into some meetings. I was at Red Bull at the time and pulled together people, and we brought in some of the riders who were riding Rampage at the time. Bear Claw came to the meeting, and we kind of sat down and we talked about, where the sport was, which women would be, potentials. And the thing that we kept circling around is that you need to be able to create an opportunity for people to build up that experience of being in a competition and, getting used to exactly what we've been talking about, getting ready to drop in. And how do you build up not just the bench of athletes that can do it, but also their experience levels, so that when it is time for prime time, like this year, they're fully ready. They've got, a bunch of experience behind them, and they've had that kind of run up to it in the right way. And that's sort of how formation was born, out of that need to just help build the experience and the base of knowledge, and really get everybody. I think somebody from the formation team said it was like exposure therapy. I think Katie said that or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was sort of the kickoff of Red Bull formation. And you came in also to, share your expertise from everything that you did from Red Bull Rampage to then start putting that event together, and working with everybody to get that job done. What was your experience like, you know, helping formation get off the ground and helping kind of just start to sketch in the pathway to Rampage?
Yeah, I mean, it's a critical step for sure. Like we just talked about, standing in the start gate is a unique experience, and to think, you're going to bring a female athlete who has a ton of experience riding, free ride in the backcountry and filming, um, to standing in a start gate on October 12th at 10 a.m., dropping with two helicopters in the air and, drones above you and 16 cameras pointed your direction is not something that would be smart, prudent, safe, or any of that. So I think, obviously formation was just critical in that early development of the female athletes. They were all out doing this type of riding, but yeah, to just kind of put them in a situation where it was a bit of a format, and gave them the ability to just kind of be together and collaborate and figure out how to build and dig and all that was really important to get to where we are today.
I think the other kind of knock-on effect of hosting formation too was that these riders really developed relationships and started thinking about what more they could do even outside of Red Bull, because Red Bull's been, really helping people along through this whole process, but also, the scene has to do a bit of work too. And so it was really cool to see formation go down, but then Hannah put on a jump jam, Camille put on an event, like all the riders started hosting their own events and bringing people together. And then it sort of became, a little bit more industry support. I was actually the first one to sign Hannah to Red Bull, but then there were a lot of other brands that kind of came in and started really backing people as well. I'm not trying to take any whatever, but that is a big vote of confidence when Red Bull comes in and puts the stamp of approval on, and it starts opening more and more doors. And I think what was really cool was to watch the kind of cascading effect of Red Bull saying like, okay, yeah, we should do a jam. We should have an athlete. We should begin to support. And I think as soon as it was clear that there was going to be kind of a pathway in the direction of Rampage, I think it made it where the athletes themselves were putting more energy into going that direction. Whereas in the past, they'd been racers because that was the way to get sponsored.
Mm-hmm.
Now there was a pathway to sponsorship outside of racing, and you started to see more brands kind of come on board, more projects coming to life, more filming, and inclusion there. Like a lot of stuff kind of unlocked around that same time.
Yeah, I mean, it really created just kind of a network for the women. The men had that kind of, all their peers, and kind of, the event had grown up over these, 23 years, and they've all been a part of it. And kind of one athlete, the older guys are teaching the younger guys on just the whole sport in general, from, getting partners to, learning how to dig, learning, how to be a professional athlete. They've had kind of mentors in front of them that have pulled them along. The women didn't have that, and I think formation was great in that respect. It kind of created a network, like any business, really. It's like they were able to get there and collaborate on how to build and who was the top riders at the time. And there was some racers there. There was Jess Blewett and there was Tawny Seagrave, and so there was some more professional athletes that were sponsored by bigger companies and bigger bike companies. So I remember when Hannah showed up, she was an alternate that first year, and she showed up and just threw down. Everybody's like, whoa, where did she come from? Bellingham, Washington, and just threw down. And now she's one of the leaders. And so that it really allowed that development across the sport, for the women to do that as well, and to get to where we are today. That's everybody was concerned last year on why the women weren't in, but it's a process like any other business and any other situation. You have to think it through and do it right. And there's no reason to rush into something if it doesn't feel right. And it didn't feel right last year. And it felt like it was a pinch to get the resources and find the right athletes. And so it took time, and I feel very proud about what we all did this year, because we did it right. We took the time. We found the right people. We had the right conversations. We found the right location. We developed a new zone that could be their own, so they wouldn't be compared riding some other male athletes' line from years past. They had their own landscape to call their own. And that took time, and that took effort, and that took resources. And so all those things, took time. And I think people just really needed to just chill out and let it happen like it did this year. And I think this is the result you get when you do things right and you take time and are thoughtful and methodical. And that's what we all did, from everybody, from the TV to the athletes to the Red Bull to my team. It was methodical and thoughtful. That's really what it was.
I would say that it was worth the wait. I mean, the
Yeah.
riders that were there absolutely threw it down. They belonged to be there, and it was awesome to see a full field of riders just all throwing it down. And the moment that gave me chills, actually, Vea was down in the finish corral, and she was talking about another rider who wasn't in the event, like a young up and coming rider. And she talked about her as like, oh yeah, a future Rampage athlete. And it just appeared, I realized in that moment, like, oh, the door is now open. This is the future. It's not just like, is this going to work? Is this going to be a one-off thing? Like, it was like so clear to everybody that like they belonged there, and like this is the future. And I'm just genuinely excited for all of mountain biking, because I said this on a previous podcast, but when I talk about mountain biking to people who don't ride, that I want them to get excited about mountain biking. I'm not always, and no offense to our spandex wearing friends, but like I'm not pointing at that as like, this is what mountain biking is. I'm pointing at Rampage being like, this is mountain biking. And even if you never, drop off a big cliff or do any tricks or whatever, I still want people, when they think of mountain biking, to think of Rampage.
Oh, we all have those rampage moments,
Yeah.
like, I'm an old guy now and I ride and I've been riding my whole life, but I have friends who are new riders, and you'll go into a berm and feel that gravity kind of, hit you, and you find a little drop, even if it's a foot or two, you get it, and you kind of like, I'm doing a little bit of rampage, and so it's an exciting part of the sport, and it's a very unique um, sport, and it's ultimate creativity can be done in this sport. And that's, we'll get into a little bit later, but that's the reason that I hooked up with the natural selection guys, is because it is all that same ethos, of just, using the environment and Mother Nature to kind of as our backdrop to what we do. And I think freeride mountain biking just absolutely allows that,
Mhm.
and you can really just be as creative as you want. So
There feels like there's so much momentum in the entire sport of mountain biking, with the women being invited to ride Crankworks the last couple of seasons, with them riding in Rampage this year. And I'd love to talk more about the momentum of the sport. And like you mentioned, the natural selection tour has now added bike to their kind of launch. Can you talk a little bit about just like everything that's been going on with natural selection. I know you've been kind of talking to them for a while, but could you just give like kind of the primer of what's gone down and where we are today?
Yeah, it's kind of a match made in heaven on my end, and when Travis Rice first approached me about Proving Grounds, I think it was back in probably early 2021 when we were doing the Prineville event. He just showed the interest, and he's like, "This is so similar to what we're doing at Natural Selection and the snowboarding, and what we're doing at the time up in Jackson Hole." And I was a huge fan because I'm a snowboarder and skier as well, and was a huge fan of what he's doing. So when he approached me, I was like, "Oh hell yeah, let's get together and let's do this." It took us, I'd say, a year to kind of court each other and figure out what would make sense. And then we decided just to merge this into it. I'm part owner now of Natural Selection Tour as well, so I've got a vested interest in it, which is super exciting to me, and what I want to do with the future and this event. So it's this really amazing kind of marriage of an existing event meeting an existing event, and now let's kind of use our same ethos of get finding the best athletes in epic venues and prime conditions, and and the most beautiful places on the earth, are really a goal of both of ours, and so that's why it's worked out so well.
I think what made the original natural selection, the snowboard event, so exciting was in the same way that Rampage originally took a bunch of riders who weren't competing in races, but were doing really interesting video part level stuff and sort of packaged it together in a way where you could experience it in event format. And then they found different ways to even show off the nuances of the event. And then, of course, they introduced new technology. I think the natural selection event in 2021 was the first time we'd ever seen like the drone live follow cam as someone's like
Mhm.
ripping down the mountain, which now is like sort of commonplace, but
Yeah.
still looks awesome. It's like watching a video game or whatever.
No, I mean,
Um,
yeah, what Travis and Liam and the crew had, the technology that they just continue to push, um, is really shaping action sports as we're seeing it now. And I think that's really our goal going forward, is just to be, for lack of better words, disruptors. We don't want to do the same. We don't want to do what has been done before. We want to look at everything fresh. We want to work with the best athletes, and really a ground up approach with the athletes. We're not doing this because some partner gave us a bunch of money and wants to get into snowboarding. We're doing this because we're snowboarders, we're mountain bikers, we're surfers, we're skiers, and we love the sports that we're playing in. We want to create more opportunity, and you know and just show new ways to look at the sports, whether that is through epic locations or the way that we shoot it, with the technology that's always evolving. FPV, I think, was the real thing that everybody marks to, but I think there's so much more that goes on behind the scenes and how we capture this, the best cinematographers, and the best editors and the best storytellers. Really, storytelling is what we want to do, so people really understand who these people are that are competing, and it's not just a number plate. It's there's a person behind that, and they have their own story to tell, and how they got here and how they got to this pinnacle part of their career to compete at this event is a long, cool story. And so we're going to try and weave those into it, and really bring in authentic partners too. We really want to bring in, people, like Yeti Drinkware has been an amazing partner, and Rivian Vehicles has come on board. Like, we're looking for partners that really, want to help us tell that story and are involved and invested in these sports like we are. So it's a pretty exciting time. We're really, really doing something different, and I think people are going to be pretty blown away with what they see here in the coming years.
I love the just general idea of you were mountain bikers and snowboarders, because I think we get so segmented of like, oh, that's mountain biking, oh, that's snowboarding, oh, that's rock climbing. And what you realize is that most people, myself included, we don't just mountain bike.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do in the winter when it starts raining or snowing where you are? Of course, you're going to go do something else because you're an active person, and there's so much overlap. I'm paying attention to snowboarding. I'm paying attention to skiing. I pay attention to mountain bike, and
Mm-hmm.
all these different sports are part of my life, and it's rare that a brand or an event series really captures more than one event at a time. And I think it would be really interesting, just that ecosystem of how you kind of connect the dots between all the different events, and start to kind of just build a base of people that care about natural selection and what natural selection is putting forward, not just the vertical that you're in that month, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's this mutual admiration society, as we call it, between the athletes. You know, like a great example is like Carson Storch and Ben Ferg. You know, like they live next to each other in Bend, Oregon. And they're great friends. They ski together. They bike together. I mean, they snowboard together. They bike together. Um, and they come out and watch the events. You know, Ben was at the was at Proving Grounds, and there's just this, kind of community of just rad people doing rad stuff, and they all, some are moto, some are ski, some are snowboard, some are surf, like, but they all appreciate what the others are doing at the highest level, and so there's this real kind of community of elite athletes, and so they all know each other and are riding together in the off seasons together, and so we're really trying to bring them all together and kind of, yeah, tell the story of action sports and what we're doing. So
I love to use the term cross pollination when it comes to
yeah.
athletes from different sports getting together and kind of comparing notes on stuff. And I've
Mm-hmm.
never really seen that before on an event level, but I feel like this is going to be a big unlock for everyone, and to be able to share best practices from surf to snow to bike. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that I can't think of anywhere where that's actually been done successfully, maybe other than the Dew Tour. But
Yeah.
this seems like a whole different level, and I'm really just genuinely excited that there's going to be an event in Queenstown, and like
Mm-hmm.
we've been talking about with proving grounds and formation, and now there's another way for people to build their experience to prepare themselves for the big show, but also, ideally this Queenstown event becomes a big standalone awesome event that people aspire to be a part of. Can you give me a little bit more insight into what Queenstown's going to look like?
Yeah. So we've talked about proving grounds, and that was the kind of, the seed that was planted that kind of started growing. And now that we've all come together and we've chosen to, to take on these four sports, and we hopefully want to expand into more sports in the future, we've kind of consolidated it now to everything is natural selection. So it's going to be natural selection bike, natural selection surf, ski, and snow are going to be the four verticals. And those are all on Instagram at natural selection bike or ski. Um, so it's now kind of evolved from the proving grounds, which was in my mind, the proving grounds, it was kind of the up and coming athletes. It was originally to get to Rampage. Now there's such a need within the sport of mountain biking to have this kind of, place that people can go to compete at. We've decided just to make this kind of our tent pole event that's going to be in Queenstown, we're calling it, and it's natural selection bike. And that's going to be kind of the elite level of these events. We'll still do proving grounds, kind of on some lower levels, like we did Carson Storch's Pacific City. That'll be a proving grounds, and we'll continue to do those kind of as those, I'd say, almost like the step below the natural selection bike, which is the real elite, kind of the highest level. And so we found this location in Queenstown. It's been almost 2 years now. I mean, Carson and I went over there 2 years ago, December, and searched, and we looked at like 24 different locations, and searched all around there, brought it down to about three locations we thought were the most ideal. And then we actually took five athletes over there to kind of validate which one was the best location in the Queenstown area. Took down Brett Reeder and Reed Boggs and Carson Storch and Casey Brown. And, we went and searched and made a film about it. It's actually called The Search for the Next Proving Grounds, which is on Outside Watch. People can check it out. I'm really proud of it. It's a really cool, about a half an hour film on our search for it. So, but basically, we had the five best athletes, searching all these locations that we'd found, which then allowed us to find this ultimate location, which is right outside of Queenstown on up near Cornet Peak. And it's just the dream location. It's got everything that I've always wanted to see in a kind of free ride course. It's got just natural terrain. I mean, there's rocks, there's cliffs, there's, natural shark fins, there's natural step downs. So our plan is to go in, and I'm leaving on November 7th here to go start the build, is to use the natural terrain and just augment it with, takeoffs and landings and cleaning things up, and making it next level in the evolution of what we're doing. But the terrain really is there. We just need to kind of, clean it up and make it, rideable for an event. We're going to have 3 different lines there, which is going to be really cool. And there's going to be kind of a new format that we're developing that's going to be on there. It'll be men and women and up and coming riders. So we'll have the world's best there as well.
I want to just reflect back because you've been doing this for, 23 plus years. What's been the biggest struggle throughout your career? I mean, you put on some of the biggest events in the world and, no risk, no reward. What have been the things that have stood out to you if you reflect back to get to this point?
Oh man, it has been a crazy ride for sure. I'm a glutton for punishment. Let's just say that. I've been kicked down in the dirt and gotten back up many, many times. So I just think it's, continuing to show up, continuing to have passion, continuing to work with the right people. Red Bull has been, was one of my first partners I ever worked with back in 1996. We did the Tahoe Fat Tire Festival, which was Red Bull's first event in the U.S., and they've been my longest, best client since then. So they've been a real key to my success, I would say, for sure. They've always believed in me. I've come to them with all sorts of projects. You being part of a couple of them, Ride and Style, we work together. And these are beyond just cycling, King of the Rock, which was a basketball tournament we did on Alcatraz Island.
That's right. Oh, just for the listener, can you just explain what Red Bull King of the Rock was? Because I completely forgot about that until right now, but I feel like they need to understand.
Yeah, still to this day, the toughest event I've ever done. It's on Alcatraz Island, near San Francisco. I think we brought over like 12 tons of infrastructure, including 5 full-on college level basketball hoops. We had to bring in all the infrastructure, the filming, the lighting. It was a nighttime event. We had to load in the middle of the night because that's the only time the island didn't have people on it. So we had to do it overnight, and it was the toughest thing I've ever done. And it's a national park, so everything has to be like hand carried and hand delivered and hand placed. There's no machines, there's nothing there. So it was crazy. And then it was kind of, I guess, B League, basketball athletes one-on-one. It was a one-on-one competition, and it was intense. It was a really crazy event that we did on there.
I mean, we could have a podcast just about that one. I mean, you put on an event within the confines of Alcatraz prison, and
it's the only sporting event ever to happen on official event to happen on Alcatraz. So I can put that feather in my cap, I guess.
Bonkers. And I think, again, just like Rampage, there's always that one, behind the scenes thing that no one sees. And the wildest part, when you mentioned hand carry, I remember seeing it. There is a back entrance to the yard in Alcatraz prison that there's this one little door, and then there's I don't even know how many steps down to the water that the boat pulls up to this tiny dock. And I mean, this is like worst case scenario for an event, I've got to imagine.
It's a prison, so they don't want you to get in and out easily. So that's the bottom line of it. And we had to go through a door. I remember it. I used to know the specs on it was like 70 by 31 or something like that, and everything had to fit through that door because that's how they locked it off. So that was the only door you could go through. So it was a super huge challenge, and definitely took years off my life putting that thing on. That was absolutely crazy. I spent 70 days on the island. I counted them, and slept on it over 6 nights. So working on that. So
that's out of control.
I get my green jacket. I always tell the National Park Service I need a green jacket because I got 70 days on this thing. Probably more than some people serve time there.
That's incredible. I mean, you're not wrong that you are a glutton for punishment. You've put on some of the most challenging events, putting an event on, and more importantly, the infrastructure behind the event out in the middle of the desert on the side of a mountain, putting on an event on a deserted island that was reserved for, prison. You've done some of the gnarliest events that I could even think of. And
done the barge trilogy as well.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Did you know that? Yeah, we did the Hell Barge, which was in San Francisco, where we took 83 truckloads of dirt and put it on a 200-foot long barge and did a bike park on it that floated around the San Francisco Bay in front of the Giants game, and that made Sports Center top plays of the week. And then we did Mississippi Grind, which was a skate event down the Mississippi River over 41 days, and we built a cement skate park on that. That was insane. And then
The,
it turned into Barge Spin, which was a BMX thing we did down in Southern Florida. So that
the
was my
show
barge.
notes for this podcast are just going to be like the greatest hits of the most insane events.
Yeah,
It's going to take people a minute to get through all this stuff, but it's all, I mean, man, you've got quite the portfolio to be proud of. And honestly, like as a mountain biker, just, I want to say thank you to you for putting the energy and effort into just making, everything big ride, free ride that you have. And, there are a lot of hands that go into, putting on the event, the 55 people that are working for you, the hundreds of people from Red Bull, the athletes, it's a heavy lift from every perspective, but there is one constant behind all this stuff, and it's you. So I
I
just want to
appreciate
say, like you make mountain biking look really good. You've opened up some huge doors for people to literally build careers on the bike and off. And I think, I don't think you get enough gratitude for the effort that you put in. It's easy to complain about this or that, but man, you've really put a lot of energy into making this sport good.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I always call Rampage my oldest son. It's He's 23 now, and I can drink with him now. So,
It's amazing.
but yeah, it's been a long journey, and I appreciate that. It is. I don't know. I just have a lot of passion for it, and I love to see things come together. And I do like to see people prosper by some of the things I get to do and do. And I've worked with Danny McCaskill. I did 4 of his projects as well, and just I feel honored to be with these athletes and filmmakers and talented people I work with on the event side and production side. I'm the luckiest guy ever. I get to do really cool things on a daily basis that are never the same, and I travel the world, and um, I get paid to do it. So it's not a lot, but I get paid.
Well, onwards and upwards. I'm excited to see natural selection bike happen and everything else that you've got up your sleeve. One way that we typically end the show is we do a segment called BPC, which is brand product content. Anything that we think is worth sharing with the audience, and obviously, like the show notes for this is already going to be ridiculous. But anything that you want to specifically highlight in any of those categories?
Yeah, I mean, it's just I think we've talked about most of it. I think natural selection is really the most excited thing I am about right now, and just the future that it holds. And it's for sports now. I think it could grow in the future, and I think our organization's almost doubled in the last year of who's working on this and bringing in the best social media people and the best producers and the best editors and the best athletes, and bringing in these advisory councils with all the best um, the leaders of each sport is really something that we're all proud of, and it is a ground up, and we're listening to where sports are and where the athletes want to see things go. And so to me, that's and I think there's just great opportunity for hopefully partners to get involved too. I hope some of your listeners will reach out to us, because we really are doing something that's different. And I think we are a really good home for a lot of products out there that want exposure in a unique way, that's credible and proven. Really, we've proven that we can do it. And if you watch Natural Selection Snow and Snowboard, and what Travis and the whole crew, and Carter Westfall's our CEO, and Liam Griffin's our chief operations officer, and there's just amazing amount of passion and smarts behind this. So hopefully people get involved and watch, and products can get involved with us as well. So look forward to hearing from people.
Awesome. Okay, my BPC, I'm going to stick with the lane that we're in as well. I think that everybody needs to see Where the Trail Ends. That was to date still one of my favorite mountain bike movies. The new Anytime movie is really sick too, but Where the Trail Ends, where they're actually going out and trying to find the next Rampage. And it's not like they come up empty handed. There's some incredible riding. And actually, to add on to that, I think North of Nightfall is another good one. Those are the two mountain bike films that I still recommend more than anything. And I think they're both kind of couched in like, where else can we get the same kind of riding that we get in Utah at Red Bull Rampage, and where else can it be done? And really, both of those films are incredible in their own right, but it always comes back to Utah. that zone is just, there's something special. There's, I don't know, something in the water. I don't know what it is, but there's
Yeah.
just some magic behind that mountain there. And what you've done over the last 23 years there has been really incredible. So,
Yeah,
um,
we appreciate that. It
thank,
is. It is a special sauce out here. It'd be really hard to recreate anywhere else.
yeah.
It's a cool zone.
Well, thanks again for being on the pod. This is such a fun conversation, and
Yeah.
yeah, best of luck with the next phase of all this stuff. And we'll definitely be watching.